So good morning to some of you guys. Good afternoon to some of you guys. Just after 12 o'clock on Sunday, we're back for another Sunday school. I want to introduce Jonathan Bluks. John and I have known each other for, I guess, just over 10 years. And originally, I ran a bar school, showed people how to make drinks. And one of the things that immediately kind of hit me about Jonathan was, even when a bunch of other students would show up in like, t-shirts and shorts or just kind of grubby, like Jonathan would always be very well put together, like really took care of his kind of image. And then I found out that he became an image consultant and a bit of a style expert. And when we started to kind of build this concept of Sunday school and doing some specialized sessions for guys, he was kind of an immediate thought that I had kind of in my head that might be helpful. So he's got a ton of great content. He's put together a short presentation on how to kind of build your confidence, especially when you're walking into a high conflict or high stress situation, like a courtroom or a negotiation. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jonathan. You can do a quick intro, and then if you want to start sharing your screen, we're good to go. Jonathan, it's all yours.
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. Nice to meet all you guys. Thanks for having me today. Yeah, as Gavin mentioned, I guess I went through. I think probably all of us as guys might go through this, or some of you guys might be thinking about it, or some. You just I think you go through life in your teenage years, or you get into work or whatever, and there's no one around that really talks to you about style. Or I feel like a lot of times for guys, we don't have that around us so much. Whereas I know for women, it's often the case, like they're very aware of how they present themselves. They're very aware of how they show up. And societally, there's a lot of messages for women that's very important for them. Whereas I think for guys, we don't necessarily get those messages as much. We get more messages about what we can accomplish, or, are we successful in life? What kind of jobs do we have? Are we strong? Those kinds of things. So I think a lot of times for guys, when it comes to how they are showing up every day, or what you're putting on and why you're wearing what you're wearing, either we don't think about it, or we might have some inkling of like, maybe I should, but we don't really know what to do. And so it's really easy to kind of be confused in the world of style, as to like, what do you wear when, or why would you, or is it that important, kind of thing. So I definitely went through a phase myself where I guess, I just felt that, like, I was like, I don't really know how to dress on my day-to-day level. And I just, I know something in my brain woke up and I said, oh, maybe it's important, like how I show up. And so to Gavin's point, at that time, actually, when I first met Gavin, I think that was kind of what was going on in my mind, is, how do I show up and how do people perceive me? And so I was just kind of working through that. And so I just got into just reading like a lot of men's magazines and exploring clothing. And it kind of was kind of a hobby / interest I had. And then I did actually, I started working some retail. So I was doing a bunch of different jobs and I met Gavin. And one that I was kind of exploring was bartending, but I was also in the retail space. And I just happened to get into selling men's clothes. And I happened to work at a place where guys were selling custom suits. So there has been a trend of, I'm not sure if it's quite as popular now or what the status is, but about 10 years ago, there's all these custom suit companies popping up, and they, do them quickly and they do them for cheap and stuff like that. So I got into that. And so I learned a lot about suiting through that. And then kind of transitioned into, as Gavin mentioned, just actually doing some image consulting. And I did do a program at George Brown College in Toronto that went over these concepts that I'm kind of going to share. And just, this idea of, what do you wear, what colors do you wear, and how these things affect you and impact you. So that's a bit of my background, and that's kind of where I'm coming from. I guess I kind of absorbed these things, and so now for me, how I dress or how I show up, it's just kind of a daily quick habit. Like the things I have in my closet are things that I wear, and so every day I just kind of pick, like, what shirt do I want to wear today? Great. Is it rainy? Is it sunny? So all that to say that when you have some basic concepts, or you think about these things, like, it doesn't have to be hard or complicated. And that's what I want to try and share with you guys today, is kind of an overall framework, like how to think about clothes. And some of you guys may not have ever thought about clothes before, and not to be overwhelmed, or not to be confused as to, well, is this and that, and should I wear this? And that's, but to try more provide a framework of just how could you think about what you wear day to day, and how might that be a part of you and who you are and how you're showing up. And at the end, I do have a couple of links to some slides that talk more about suiting. So at the end, I'll talk more specifically about suiting. As Gavin mentioned, as I understand from you guys, yeah, if you're going into a situation with, it's a court situation, you may want, and you're maybe in a situation where you're wearing a suit for the first time, there's things you could understand about the suit and what you're wearing that might help you show up in a way that you just are more put together than if you didn't think about your suit beforehand. So cool. That's a little intro about me. I'm going to share my screen now. And I'm thinking for the presentation, it'll probably be about maybe 20 minutes or so. So I'm trying to just share some information that is kind of useful for you guys, but then we can do some Q&A after. And as long, you know, and I'm flexible on time. So if you guys do have questions or things you want to talk about in regards to, you know, clothes and style, I'm happy to chat for a while. Let me share my screen. Okay, here we go. Okay, and you're able to see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it.
Cool. I should just say Style and Confidence for Men. Simple title. Okay. Oops. Wrong screen. There we go. Okay. So I actually, another kind of side note is in my journey after I kind of had left some of those things I was doing, I actually became a teacher. And my background is in computers, and so I actually had a job teaching some of the knowledge that I had. So you might find as I go through this, like I really try to find a kind of a path through what I talk about and what I share, and try to find, you know, kind of a journey through the information, so it kind of makes sense, the information builds, and so you'll see some of my teacher skills coming through, I think. So I want to start with sort of, why is it that style matters, and what is it like, what can it do for us? And if you think about it, like, yeah, like we all wear clothes, like, well, why do we bother wearing clothes? Like what, like who cares? Like, we don't have to wear clothes depending on where we live. But right away, if you think about that, it's like, well, actually clothes are really a form of protection. And they protect us largely from weather, right? So clothes evolved out of, you know, we don't, you know, as we evolved, we don't have fur and hair the way other animals do. That is their protection, right? So for some reasons we evolved, we became hairless. And so, but what we have in place of hair is we have clothes. So now clothes have that practical side of, like, let's say, the basic protection from the weather. And I'm going to talk about some other ways of sort of thinking about the clothing spectrum, but then they also are kind of a protection, like a safety protection. So like if you wear steel toe boots, you know, protect you on a construction site or that kind of thing, right? So there's physical protection as well as a kind of elemental protection. But there's another thing that's happened with clothes, which is they also kind of signal social status. So as we're social beings, clothes have become a thing that kind of represent something about self-expression, which I'll get into, as well as something about where you are in your social status, what kind of person you are. And so clothes are kind of intertangled in that. So this first quote that I have here, both of these just come from this guy on Instagram. If any of you guys happen to be on Instagram, there's tons of style stuff out there. There's tons of style information out there. So if a seed is planted here, you can easily do some Googling and you can go down a whole rabbit hole of stuff about men's style. But I picked a couple of quotes here that I felt highlighted the kind of the spirit of what I wanted to share today. So the first quote here: the biggest reason style matters is because of the story you tell yourself. What you put on can either contradict or reinforce your sense of self. So it's a really clear example of this is a lot of times how you feel can reflect how you dress. And some of you guys might notice this, like if you feel low energy, if you feel down, if you're feeling depressed, like you might find that you don't have the capacity to really think about what you put on. So you don't care. You put on some clothes and a t-shirt, some, you know, jeans and a t-shirt. Maybe you haven't washed those clothes and they've been sitting on the ground for the past couple of days because you've been too tired or demotivated too much. Like you go out and you walk around, it's like, and you're almost reflecting that because you didn't put any energy into what you're wearing, and it's really reflecting your current emotional state. versus if you got up and you were like, you know what, I want to have a good day today. I've got a fresh, clean pair of jeans that I washed that fit me well, and I have a shirt that I like. I'm going to put that on. Like you're kind of conveying something different, and it's not just to the world; it's also to yourself, right? So, and that's actually when I started to dress more and look in this more for myself in my life. That's kind of what it was for me. It's like I wanted to make sure I'm showing up in a way that I feel like I can be my best self. And to what Gavin picked up, in a way Gavin picked up on the message, like I want to show up in a way that's saying, hey, like I'm taking things seriously, right? Like I'm here because I want to be here and I want to give my best effort. And I was starting to use clothes to try and communicate that. So the second quote, your clothing can help distract you from your ability to be present, or can enhance your ability to be present. And a really, really easy example for this idea is if you think about, and you guys have probably had this situation at some point in your life, if you're wearing clothes that don't fit you properly, so something is like too tight, or you just like your pants are too baggy or something, there you can have a feeling of just kind of like discomfort, and that type of thing would affect your ability to be present. So if you're in a situation and you just feel silly in your clothes, you feel like they do not fit you, it's just very hard to feel confident. It's very hard to feel relaxed because your brain is kind of like focused on your clothes, and this uncomfortable feeling you have. So I think that's another kind of quote that highlights kind of an important idea here. Okay, so going into the next topic here, I want to kind of break down confidence a little bit. And this stuff is all like my own thinking about it. So there's not like, I'm sure if you read books and stuff, you'll find out about these things. And this is kind of my digestion of things I've read in books or things I've thought about in my life that I've just kind of distilled here. And so I was thinking about confidence, and for me, I was thinking about, what is confidence and how do you have confidence? And I feel we probably all struggle with that in our life and particularly for men, I think confidence is a big word. I think if you asked anyone, or particularly say women, like what are you looking for in a guy? Like I would say probably like confidence is the thing that people look for. Confidence is the thing that people expect, right? So whether you show up at work or another situation, and like in a way, as a guy, your currency is your confidence. And so that's a lot of pressure for us to live under. But I think underneath of confidence really is competence. And if you're doing things you know how to do, then basically you have confidence. If you've done something 1,000 times, you're pretty confident you know how to handle that thing, right? Things that are kind of habitual that you've just done, like you almost don't even think about them. So the confidence is almost just a default that's there. And I think when it comes to the things in our lives, there's like two aspects. There's the practical skills and what I call this like the social skills. And I wanted to break those out slightly because I think a lot of times as men, I don't know if we're trained or it's a societal thing, but we're really trained to rely on like our practical skills and our ability to learn practical things. And so whether that's from fixing cars to, working on the stock market to, lifting weights or whatever, like just different skills. A lot of times, they are skills that involve us interacting with things or the world, and they're not necessarily tied to people. Like I said, so just like I said, learning to fix a car, right? It's a practical skill, and you can have confidence in it, but it's really targeted at sort of things and like I said, interacting with objects. And I think a lot of times as guys, that's what we focus on, skills. So we just learn new things, and those are definitely good things. And as you learn those practical skills, you can develop confidence. But they tend to be very specific, and they don't necessarily transfer into the social world. And a classic example you could think of this is you could think of like a classic, stereotype of a nerd who's like really smart in computers and like knows how to fix computers and make computers and program computers, but they have a terrible time interacting with people, right? So they have a very strong practical skill in, interacting with a computer. Perhaps they can make good money and have a good job because they know these skills, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it translates over to the social side. So that's why I wanted to separate these two out. And so social skills are skills that involve people, and social skills, unfortunately, I think are a lot more challenging because they're more ambiguous, and they involve this intersection of who we are with this social world. And the social world is constantly changing, right? So if you think about fashion, like fashion's always changing, and the expectations of how you show up can sort of shift, and there's trends, and all that stuff is basically being created by all the other people out in the world, right? So the social skills, but social skills in a way are like just as important or perhaps more important than these practical skills. But I want to make this distinction because I know for myself as a guy, I feel like in my life, certainly I've tried to rely on practical skills for my confidence, but I've definitely realized over time that in a way, it's like the social skills are what are actually really important. And it doesn't matter what you know, if you're in a social situation, like just because you can fix a car doesn't mean you're going to do well in a group of people, you know, when you're talking to them and that kind of thing, right? So I think those two pieces, as you work on them in life, and again, particularly the social skills side, as you add those together and you have more competence, then that's kind of what leads to confidence. So let's talk a bit about style and how that sort of intersects with the idea of confidence. And so as sort of the first slides alluded to, you know, your clothes are in a way reinforcing how you see yourself, and they're sending a message to the world kind of about how you see yourself, and you're also trying to tell the outside world kind of who you are in that world. You know, are you a person, and I'll get into this, are you a person of high status or low status? And like clothes can kind of signal that. And if you show up to an environment and you're wearing weird things, like people are going to have some conclusions or judgments about you just based on what you're wearing. So, but clothes is part of a larger set of building blocks. So, and I've pictured it here as sort of inside of yourself and outside. And if you think of how we exist as people, we do exist as a series of boundaries. So all of us right now have thoughts and feelings that we're having, and the way our brains work, they chatter away and tell us things, and there's memories we have. All of that is all internal to us, and no one else can really know exactly what those things are, but they're going on for us. And those things ultimately are dictating how we live our lives. So how the things our brain's telling us, the messages we're getting, those turn into things we act on, those turned into, you know, patterns and habits, right? So that is our inside. And that, in a way, that's the core of who we are, of how we experience life. But then you hit the next layer, which is your physical body, right? And so that's, so yeah, fitness and physique, I'll talk about in a second. But basically have your body, and then you kind of have your general, like, you know, what you can sort of arms reach around you. There's kind of a general kind of personal space, you could say. And then you might have the space you live in. So, you know, what your home is like, or, you know, or maybe your car, if you have a car, like what is your car like? And those are things that basically people start to see. Sorry, there's a little bug here. Those are things that people start to see, and those are things that start to communicate things about you. If you have an old beat up car that's rusted and, you know, it doesn't operate very well, like it's saying something if you're going to drive around your town or your city with that car, right? Versus if you have a brand new Tesla or something, right? So even with these things we use practically, like there's messages that we send to the world through them, right? Related to our body is our postures or mannerisms and how we talk or speech. And then on top of all that is the idea of clothing. I guess you could always say clothing, and you could say your home and, you know, what your home is like, and you could say your car and that kind of thing. But your clothing is kind of unique because you wear it on your body and you wear it wherever you go. And the thing about clothing is you're basically going to be wearing it like every day of your life. Like, you know, you were born as a child, you were thrown into diapers, and ever since the day you were thrown into your first diaper, you've been wearing clothes for the rest of your life. So there is an element that clothes are like that close to us, that we are literally putting clothes on our body every single day. And like, there's not a day it's going to go by that we're not going to do that, because that's how much clothes are at this intersection of like something that's very intimate to us that we are putting on every day to cover our bodies. But as we walk around, people see the clothes that we're wearing as part of us. That's part of what we show the world. So in these building blocks here, what I wanted to share was that like they kind of intersect with each other, or they kind of, it's like they go from the top to the bottom and the bottom to the top. And there is a loop where your inner thoughts and feelings, like I was saying, kind of dictate how you feel. And like your brain is going, do I feel good today? Do I not? And if you feel good, you might be like, oh, I feel good, I have some energy. You might then go to the gym, right? And you motivate yourself to go to the gym, and that gives you some energy. And, you know, a lot of gym and fitness stuff is about physique, right? And obviously just moving your body is healthy and helps you to feel better in your body. But there's obviously a big component of how you appear with your body, right? And that's your body without clothes, right? And then you have your postures and mannerisms. So how do you talk? How do you move in the world? And yeah, so what kind of hand gestures? How do you carry yourself? Do you sit up straight? Do you slouch? Like that kind of stuff. That is also all of your body, and your clothes. It actually can affect that. If your clothes are too tight, you might feel inclined to sort of, your clothes are tight, you feel, but if your clothes are too loose, maybe you'll feel more free and fluid and kind of thing, right? And even with your speech, how you talk, right, is against something else that people are picking up on. And if you're wearing clothes that feel comfortable, you might feel a bit more confident. Your speech might therefore be a bit more authoritative. Someone wearing a very nicely cut suit could speak with authority, but if someone's wearing, like sweats and a t-shirt or something, like their ability to believe that they can speak with authority is going to be different than that person who's dressed up wearing a suit. So that is how I feel that these all intersect, and how clothing is actually really important. It's not just we just do it and that's it. It's not a big deal. Like it really reflects how you're feeling on the inside and what you want to convey to the world, up through your body, into how you carry yourself, into how you talk, right? And I think clothing can intersect all those areas. And also one last thing to say about that, actually, because of this outside in, if you are choosing clothes that you feel better about, or you feel more comfortable in like a positive sense, that you like how they look and you feel they're aligned with kind of what you want to convey to the world, then that works its way down to the inside, so you can kind of feel better or have better thoughts inside of yourself if you're dressing in a way that you feel, you look in the mirror and you feel, hey, I like how I look today, right? Whereas if you're wearing clothes that don't fit you properly, again, you pick them up off the ground, they're dirty, they're wrinkly, you can't look into yourself in the mirror and feel proud and confident in yourself, right? Like your brain just can't receive that very well, because it knows that, hey, these are dirty old clothes that I just threw on, and in a way that could potentially reinforce those bad feelings you're having in that day, right? So there's an outside in kind of feedback loop here. Okay, so what I want to talk about next is this bigger picture of style and how it intersects with the social world. And so I created this little like matrix here that kind of shows how, because clothes is something we are choosing, it's always going to be a self-expression. Like it can never not be a self-expression, because you had to choose to put those clothes on your body. Like no one, until you hit a phase in life where you're old and you can't put your clothes on anymore, then someone else is putting clothes on for you. Like you're the one that's choosing to put your clothes on every day, right? And even actually when you were younger, your parents would choose your clothes for you and they would put them on you. So there is an element that if you're, you could almost be stuck in a phase where, you didn't learn a lot about clothes and what to wear. And so you may never have owned that part of your life. And maybe for some men who've gotten married and stuff, it's like, well, actually now their wives going to tell them what to wear. And in a way, if you think about that as a man, like that's not really good. You should own, yourself and how you show up. And it's as best as possible, you should be conscious about what you're doing and why you're doing that. And so I think a lot of the unconsciousness we have about clothing kind of goes back to when we were kids and our parents just put whatever on us. And our parents likely weren't all that style conscious. Our parents, going back a generation or two, like depending on what kind of our upbringings were, like probably just were very practical, and our parents just put us in what they could afford. So this kind of thinking wouldn't really be a part of what we would learn growing up. So thinking about this space and trying to own it kind of allows you to own yourself. And I do feel like as a man, like that's what we want to do in our life. We want to try and own all the different aspects. And if we're not owning it, that means it's a habit that someone else gave to us that we just live under, or we're living in a way that it's being dictated to us. And we're not really being conscious about it. So that intersection then is about self-expression. And I just wrote here, like it's feeling comfortable with yourself and how you show up. So the more you feel free to express yourself in your world, then the more comfortable you feel. Like you don't feel so stressed, you don't feel so self-conscious. You're just like, I'm me, this is who I am, I feel good. And if you think about clothes, it's like I'm comfortable with what I'm wearing and I'm not thinking about it or whatever. But that does intersect with social status. And because we're social creatures, we can also never escape social status. And because of that, there is elements of the kind of respect or in the kind of ways that people will see you that are either high or low, and a factor of that is what you're wearing. And it is just a natural thing. I think I have a bias, just kind of how I grew up, or things that I almost imagined or didn't realize about social status, and thought shouldn't exist, everyone's equal kind of thing. And while we are all equal, there is a thing in our world that we rank each other, and we have different ways of doing that, but certainly clothing is one kind of social aspect of that. And then what I wanted to say is all of this is occurring. So how we express ourselves around people. So the social status is just other people, right? So we go to a meeting or we go into a situation, that's the social context, right? And there's going to be different rules in different social contexts. And in some cases, like actually, the clothing, that social context may not really involve a lot around clothing. So in that sense, it may not matter, but there may be other contexts where it does really matter kind of how you're showing up. And one simple example like that is a job, right? Like Gavin mentioned, I stood out from some of the other students because of how I showed up. And that may have helped me eventually get a chance to work in his bar and develop those skills further. Whereas there may have been other students that, because they didn't convey that, they kind of didn't stand out in a way that allowed them to then have that opportunity, right? So social context is the rules and the expectations that define the expression of social status. So it's just kind of the expectations. Like if you're in a certain job that requires you to show up in a suit, like that's what the social status dictated, right? So a lot of times in like banking or law, for example, there's just an expectation that, how do I know that you're a trustworthy person? Well, I know because you're wearing a suit, and people who are trustworthy wear suits, and that's why you're a lawyer, and that's why you're a banker, So there's shorthand methods of kind of conveying information, and they will kind of intersect with self-expression. And just one other final aspect of this. So non-conforming, meaning that you are wearing whatever you want and you are ignoring the social status rules, right? So you show up to a wedding and you're wearing jeans and a t-shirt where everyone else is wearing a suit, right? And you're doing that because you're like, I don't care about suits. I don't care about that. That's not comfortable. I don't care that everyone else is wearing that. I'm just wearing jeans and a t-shirt. Versus conforming is when obviously you really match the rules of the social context, and that everyone there needs to wear a suit. I will also wear a suit, So that's how self-expression and social status intersect. And I have a little slide here of a couple of examples of these quadrants. And again, this is just, I just wanted to try and have some visuals to try and convey how these are kind of intersecting a little bit. And so there's high status and low status. And an example of people who are non-conforming but also high status is famous artists, musicians, celebrities. And so here, this is like a picture of Harry Styles, who clearly dresses in a way that's sort of feminine, wild colors. He's covered in tattoos. His outfits are just like really wild, like a lot of pinks and like really huge clothes and old throwback vibes to the 70s kind of thing. But he is high status because he's created a career for himself as a musician, as as a sex symbol, as this highly creative artist. So in a way, he can be non-conforming and maintain high status because of this position that he's in. So whereas you think of, say, someone on the other end, so like a king or whatever, and actually, if you think about kings and stuff, they wear very ridiculous clothing. But in a way, that's part of the status. It's like, that's what conveys the high status, because these clothes are in a way so ridiculous that the common person would not wear these clothes. But they signal to the world who this person is. But also when it comes to, say, particularly this example of like royalty, is like all these clothes are very specific, very chosen. They all have very specific symbolic meaning. And I think even if you go back in history and stuff, like certain colors would not be worn. There's like royal colors, and you could not, as a peasant person, wear any of these royal colors. A lot of that would have to do with the accessibility of that color and how expensive it would be to find that color and create that color and dye all that. So and a lot of these things, that's where they kind of come from traditionally back in history. But then if you go on the low status side, you could imagine, again, some nerd, just a stereotype, someone who doesn't really care how they dress, against someone who's perhaps really relying on their knowledge or their practical skills as for their social status. But in this kind of stereotype, the stereotype is that they don't really care how they dress, and people kind of think they're losers, right? So that is sort of a low status non-conforming. Whereas on the other side, someone who's perhaps trying to conform, who recognizes that, oh, I should wear a suit, but they don't really understand suiting. They don't really understand what it means to wear a suit that fits properly. And so they might wear a suit that is too big. And I certainly could relate to this as someone coming into the working world in my early 20s, and just being in some situations where I'm wearing dressed up clothes, but I don't understand how they fit. I don't really understand how this works, and so I don't know if I ever quite looked like this guy, but certainly I wouldn't understand how things fit. And it's just a giveaway that you're a low status person who's trying to conform but isn't wearing something that you don't really understand what you're wearing, right? So that's an example of how this matrix kind of works. And so I guess kind of want to give that as a picture for you guys, as this kind of model is how you kind of think about, like, how am I expressing myself? And then, like, how is that intersecting with what the social expectations are? And where do I want to be on that? Could I be non-conforming and still be high status and feel that I can be respected? Or do I need to conform more? That kind of thing. So that's kind of how that matrix works. Okay, so on clothes themselves, I wanted to kind of point out that there is a spectrum of clothing. And in a way, that's why I think sometimes clothes are confusing, because in a way, how we live now is all our clothes are all messed together. Like, we don't have sort of clothes so much that's designated for only one thing. And some of it, I guess, has to do with the fashion world, and the fashion world is always pulling influences from all over the place. So you could maybe find some kind of construction type clothing showing up in a fashion show that has nothing to do with construction, so there's a lot of recycling and moving around of ideas and fabrics and things throughout the clothing world. But in general, for most of our lives, there's a spectrum of purely functional clothing, as I was mentioning and earlier, like clothes that keep us warm, for example, or cool, keep us dry. And then obviously specific functions like steel-toed boots, or military, police, fire, that have specific kind of uniforms that are meant for safety. Again, like a construction worker, like wearing a hard hat, like that's a functional thing. It's not, a hard hat is not really chosen to be a style item, although perhaps someone could leverage that and turn it into their own style item, but it's meant there for safety. Steel-toe boots are meant for safety. In the farming industry, the same type of thing. And a lot of the clothes that we wear actually used to be functional. So even jeans, they used to be like for mining and for farming, right? Like jeans was a material that was thick and durable, and they were built to sort of be with men who are working in sort of an industry, but they morphed into the casual realm, right? So jeans are a very casual item, and a lot of times jeans are paired with sneakers, and they're paired with sports jackets, t-shirts, and sweaters. All these things are casual, almost yeah. And actually functional, I want to mention athletic as well. So like running shoes are an example. Like, they are built for running. They're not so much built for style. They might be stylish, or someone might think they're stylish, but they're built to help you run, right? But a lot of times those things do get transferred. So a lot of times people do wear running shoes with their jeans, right? So that's kind of in the middle. And then on the far end is your formal, right? Where it's really about ceremonies such as, say, weddings or funerals, holiday dinners, and then occupations. That kind of, there's not a lot of function to the clothing, but it signifies that, like I was saying, I'm a trustworthy person. I'm a lawyer, I'm a judge, I'm a banker. I'm wearing a suit to try and convey to you that I'm someone you can trust, right? So really, that is also, you can see about status. But that's more about formality. So, and because a suit really isn't worn because it keeps you warm so much. Like, a suit much more is about kind of what it conveys in terms of social status, versus a winter coat, which is very clearly to keep you warm, right? So I just want to make you aware of that spectrum. Most of us on a day-to-day level are basically dressing casual, right? Most of us are wearing jeans with sneakers, t-shirts, sweaters. Like, that's largely where we are. But it is good to realize, like, if some of you guys might actually, a lot of your day, maybe you guys are in construction or farming or something, like, where a lot of your day really is your functional clothes. And the reason I wanted to show the spectrum was because the risk is that because you live all day in the functional, you might start to bring those things into your casual because that's just what you're wearing all day long, right? So it's just good to be aware that, hey, like if I'm done my workday and my workday involves this functional clothes, I can switch out of that and be casual for the rest of my day, or be casual for my weekend. And if there's a situation that requires me to be dressed up, I can understand that I'm going to a formal situation. I can wear a suit going to that formal situation, right? And I'm not thinking I'm so uncomfortable because I just see myself as a construction worker and I never wear suits, you know, like you can have that mental flexibility based on what you're doing and where you're going. So just to highlight that really quickly with some examples here, on the far end, we have sort of like this loungewear, which is, you know, basically athletic clothes that are casual and comfortable. So sweats, basically sweats and running shoes kind of thing. And as you move through, you get more casual. So maybe you have a button-up shirt instead of a sweater. Instead of kind of big heavy winter coat, you've got more of an overcoat, like a wool overcoat. You can see that the shoe style starts to change. We go from a jean into maybe a khaki or something, so a softer sort of material, and then all the way into the formal where it's actually like, you know, a full-on suit. Whereas in the business, maybe we're not wearing a suit jacket, we're just wearing a shirt, or, you know, in this case it's like a turtleneck shirt. So that's just, I wanted to provide as a visual example of kind of how that spectrum can look. And then what I want to do, just to kind of start wrapping things up, is kind of talk about the things to think about when you are approaching style, because it's basically 3 fundamental things. And I think it's just confusing if you look at men's magazines and you go on Google and you just see all these clothes all over. And but like when you break it down, the core thing you need to know about what you're putting on your body is, how does it fit you? And, you know, what colors are you wearing? And are there patterns or textures in what you're wearing? Like that's the core element. And then beyond that, it is maybe about your context and like and sort of what you want to convey. But if these things aren't really working, then it doesn't really matter. Like it's just, things are going to feel kind of off, right? So with fit, a lot of fit, I think, comes down to first of all, just not having things that are baggy. So having things that are not too big for you. But in a way, a lot of fit really comes down, I think, to kind of conveying a male idealization, right? And this is like an old, you know, sculpture of a, you know, some sort of Greek god, and you can already tell, like 2,000 years ago, whenever this is made, there's a very clear idealization of the male body, and what that's conveying is strength, right? Control, dominance. And in this simple example on the right, you can see that fit is clearly playing a role in who appears more confident. And I think this is, you know, a common example on the internet. You'll see this picture, and you can clearly see that if you went to the bank and you wanted to talk to someone about your bank account, and this guy on the left shows up, a signal in your brain is like, I don't know if this guy's that experienced, right? Like, I don't know if this guy can fix what I need fixed, right? But if the guy on the right shows up, your default is going to be much more that you would assume and trust that this guy knows what he's doing. It doesn't mean he does, but the cues you're going on, you feel like, oh no, this guy on the right, he's serious, he'll get the job done that I need to get done, right? But a lot of it is based around this you know, this idea of big shoulders, broad back, and things that kind of signify strength in the male physique. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end as I talk more specifically about suiting. That said, all of us have different body types, and that's how our bone structures work, how wide our shoulders are, how wide our hips are. And a lot of the idealized physique is really about broad shoulders, thin hips, right? That thick back. That's just, if you look at magazines, you look at bodybuilding stuff, like that's what you're going to see. But the reality of the world is there's all kinds of kind of body types. We might have narrow shoulders and wide hips. So that's going to be a bit of a different thing. And so that is something to be aware of as you look at yourselves. And you can wear clothes for any body type. So the thing is because clothes cover your body, if you wear clothes that fit you properly, that physique doesn't exactly matter, because that's underneath the clothes, and the clothes are kind of complementing and working with that physique, right? And again, if you look up the body types and stuff, you can find out more about that, and maybe find out what you think your body type is. But it's something you're aware of. And one thing actually I will say is, when it comes to finding clothes, a lot of times it is hard to find clothes that fit you, and particularly if you have a body type that doesn't seem to match what you're finding in the store. And that's nothing wrong with you. That's just the way stores build to averages, or, you know, companies build clothes to an average fit. So sometimes when you might be trying to, if you are thinking about this and you're trying to find clothes that fit you and you're running into like, I don't think these things fit me properly, you'll actually learn things about your body. You might learn that, oh, wait a second, I have very thick hips. And when I'm trying to wear pants, it's like they're baggy at the bottom, but they're so tight around my hips. I have a couple of friends like that. And so when you do start thinking about these things, you might start to find that it's hard to find clothes that fit you because of the way your body is. The really important thing of that is to recognize that like it's not a problem with your body, it's just a problem with industry and how clothes are made, and they're made to kind of sell as many for an average person. So it's important to recognize that it's not your body that's the problem. It's the, you know, it's just the way clothes are, and they've got to be made, and they don't know who you are specifically, outside of getting into, say, custom suiting, where you can have everything sort of made exactly for your body. And that's how you would probably get the ideal fit, you know? So second is color. And I think a lot of times as men, we either don't think about color, or we're not colorblind, but it's just, we're not color conscious. And the basic thing here is just wear two colors, and just the colors should kind of go together. So in the first one, the guy's wearing a dark blue on top and kind of a light blue on the bottom, as some black in there for his shoes and his belt. And it's just kind of like, yeah, two colors. The same with the guy in the middle here with the gray pants and the black t-shirt. Like it's kind of simple. So if you just think of like, I'm going to wear two colors today and the colors will complement, then you've got a basic outfit, right? You could wear all black or you could wear all blue. But if you just kind of break it up a little bit, then you suddenly have like an outfit. And I won't talk too much, but color has its intensity, its value, its saturation, which is, yeah, like its intensity. So value is light and dark. Saturation is it a really deep, rich blue, or is it a really light, faded blue? And then warmth is, you know, blue being a cool color, and orange is, of course, you know, this color, the sun, being much warmer, oranges and yellows. So that tends to be how colors work. So I won't go too deep in that. And if you guys research, you could go down understanding color further. But the third piece is just pattern and texture. And so just like you can wear like one color, you could also just wear one pattern. And so usually for me, if I am wearing a pattern, it's my top. I usually don't wear patterned pants. And so you can see like on the right, this guy with this, you know, flowery shirt, like it's just got very simple cargo pants on the bottom, an example of a functional thing that became kind of a fashionable, stylish thing, but it's just simple, right? It's like just a pair of pants with, you know, this flowery shirt, and the texture on the left. So the guy's wearing a sweater that has these kind of lines on it. That's the texture of the sweater. That's its weave, but it does create a kind of feel that there's something going on. It's not just a solid color. So again, the simple rule there is just wear one pattern, right? So that's the basics there. So the fit, the color, and the pattern. And then with all this stuff, it is really important to find the part of you that just has fun with it. And there are like parts inside of us that are trying to express themselves, and there are parts that want to be having fun. So when you kind of understand these basics and you're like, great, I know that these pants fit me. I like the color of it. It goes well with this shirt that I have that's this other color. Then you're in a good zone of owning kind of your style and what you are communicating out to the world. And it shouldn't feel rigid. So it's really important that you find an intersection of like, I feel good showing up. Actually, sorry, there's someone here, I'll admit them. You should feel good showing up, and you should feel like you can be yourself, with an understanding that you may be wearing things that you know are catering to the social context. And so it's always kind of a trade-off that you're making. But the thing that I want to convey is that you want to do it consciously. Like if you're not going to wear a suit to a place that requires a suit, you want to do it in a way where you're like consciously doing it and saying, no, like I'm choosing to not do that. I'm choosing to break that kind of social rule. And it's not just because it's a habit and I feel uncomfortable in suits and that, it's I'm making that choice, you know? So you want to have that sense of self-expression, and you want to have fun, and it not be this terrible chore to put on your clothes, right? Oops, back to that. Oh, okay, cool. Okay, so then I want to just wrap up with speaking specifically to suiting, and I'm just going to just fly through a couple of things here around fit and style, and just because there's a lot involved in suits, but I just want, and you can find so much information about suits, so I just want to give you guys like the quick Coles notes here, and then you can look up. But basically what I wanted to say is, so how a suit fits is largely about various points of the body and how the fabric sits. So again, with this example of the oversized clothes, and you can tell like basically things aren't fitting properly. The shoulders are kind of sagging off the side. There's way too much material down the bottom here. Like there's the crotch is hanging down. Like the legs are, who knows where the legs are in there, right? So a lot of it is about certain points of the body and where the suit fits on certain points. So in this example on the left, the shoulders are tight, like they're aligned. The cut of the suit comes in a little bit, sort of emphasizing that kind of idealized male posture. There's no bagginess in the bottom by the shoes. It's, you know, the cuff just kind of hits the shoe and that's it. There's no extra material, right? So this slide that I have here, I have a link on the slides, which I can share with you after. Gavin can share out with you guys. But yeah, so, you know, again, how does it fit on the shoulder? How does it fit in the back? Is it fit nicely, or is there's all this extra material, right? So these are the types of things that you can think about if you are going to a situation where you need to get a suit and you want to just be as close as possible and having a good fit. And you can always kind of get things tailored to help it fit better. And the other thing I want to mention is there are different types of suits. And there's different fits. Of course, some suits do fit a lot tighter, and those would be these more modern fits. And then some suits do kind of fit a little bit looser, and those would be kind of classic fits. There's different types of lapels, and there's 2-button suits, 3-button suits, 1-button suit, and there's 3-piece suits, right? So there is a lot of different things within suiting. And I just want to include this slide because it talks about them. So this is the classic suit, the sort of a single-breasted suit that has 2 buttons. That's very much like a business style suit. But then you can also have these double-breasted style where like one lapel kind of comes under the other and it's basically buttoned on both sides. And you can see right away that from that, it's clearly a more formal suit. It's something that's for a special occasion, whereas this is a suit you might wear every day. Whereas this suit here, if you're wearing that every day, like you are signaling some very high status by wearing a double-breasted suit every single day with a bow tie. But this is very much an evening dinner suit. You could see this as a wedding type of suit, right? And probably even the suit that the bride or the groom would wear, not necessarily, you know, the guests. And then there's sort of unstructured casual blazers as well. Tuxedos, again, a James Bond type thing for cocktail dinners and certain events and stuff. So I just wanted to bring you guys like to your attention that there is different styles of suits. There's not just one suit kind of thing, right? So even within that realm, there's things to kind of think about. And you said you can do more research on that front. So, okay, that is basically kind of the information I wanted to share with you guys. And we can do a bit of a Q&A session now. And if you guys have any questions at all, I'm happy to discuss. And even if you just want to discuss the concepts and just process it, I'm happy to, happy to chat further.
That's awesome, Jonathan. Thank you very much. It's great. No share screen. So a couple of things I wanted to comment on before we kind of open up and before we start the recording. Very early on in your presentation, you said, we evolved to be hairless. I don't know about the rest of the guys on the call, but I'm a bit of a hairy beast, and I think I'm single-handedly keeping Gillette in business. But another thing that that kind of dawned on me was a session that I heard Dr. Gabor Mate speak at. He's a clinical psychologist, and he talks about survival mechanisms. He said like he lives in Vancouver or in Victoria, and sometimes he likes to go up into northern BC and go on hikes. And as an element of survival, you need to have like a full parka, like a winter jacket. You need to have a hat. You need to have like face guard. You need to have all that kind of stuff. And a lot of times when we grow up, you get the sense that we build these survival mechanisms as young people. And when I was watching him deliver this talk, he was actually doing it in Los Angeles, California, which is obviously much warmer than northern BC. And he said it's important to understand that the survival mechanism that I incorporate in northern BC in the middle of winter will save my life. But if I don't take off that survival mechanism or adjust that survival mechanism when I get to Los Angeles, that same thing could kill me. Like I would get heat stroke and I would die. So it's important to kind of understand that there are, times and places for each one of these kind of applications. And the other thing I wanted to touch on just before we shut off the recording is there is a tremendous formality when you walk into court. You've got the judge who's wearing a gown, and the lawyers are all wearing gowns, and the court clerks are all wearing gowns. And sometimes I think it's designed on some level to be intimidating and to be so formal, and that puts people almost on the defensive immediately. So I think when you were talking about kind of conforming, you could conform in a number of different ways. Like if you were a member of Hell's Angels, you might not want to put on a three-piece suit and a bow tie because it's not consistent with who you are as an individual. But you might want to kind of align a little bit more closely so that I'm not saying like you walk in with assless chaps on, but like you would obviously like tone your repertoire accordingly, so that it's a little bit more conforming to the environment that you're in, and is able to kind of immediately garner you the respect that you're hoping for in that scenario. And in one of the emails that I sent out, it mentioned, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. But then the caveat to that is that the last impression is the lasting impression. So as people are walking out of the courtroom, how they see you presented is very important in their decision making. And that could be the judge, it could be the lawyers, it could be a jury, it could be any number of people who might have an influence over a decision. And I guess the last thing that I wanted to talk about really quickly, and this is for guys across Canada. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with this, but I go to a place called Maxwell's. I don't know if you guys have seen this before, Maxwell's Clothiers. And they do custom tailored clothing. And Jonathan was talking about kind of lapels earlier on. These are a couple of ones that I did. They're super, super cheap. I'll put the link in the chat. But you can choose like a different style. I don't know if you can see the collars on those two shirts. This one's a bit beat up, it's old. But the collars are different. Like this one's got French cuffs. This one's got classic cuffs. The thing I kind of liked about it is you can choose like to have a little monogram put on your cuff if you want to. And it just like all these things are good for kind of building your level of confidence. Those like from a tailored shirt perspective, those are like $35 a piece, which might seem expensive, but for most places, if you go for a tailored shirt, you're looking at 70 or 80 or $90 a piece. You get to choose your fabric, you get to choose, they physically tailor it exactly to you. And I'll tell you, the first time I put on a shirt that was actually made for my body, it's a transformative experience. You feel like a different person because this thing is meant to be on your body, not on anybody else's body in the world, but on your body. And if I can, they come to every city in Canada. They usually take up some space in like a hotel, and they're there for 3 or 4 days, and you can just drop in and have them. They're based out of Hong Kong, but you drop in, they take your measurements, you choose your fabrics, and then 12 weeks later, you just get this bundle of perfectly tailored shirts. They'll do full suits as well, and they're cheap, but just wanted to add that in as well. So just before we kind of I guess I'll shut off the recording now, and then we'll flip back into kind of a Q&A.